Hi. So to complete this module, I had to do some industry experience or work placement. Bulk of my hours were done at 10 Green Bottles as a sommelier. 10 Green Bottles is a small wine bar in Brighton. Also has an off license, so people can come in and buy wine to take away, or people can sit in, have a glass of wine or a bottle, and we offer cheese and charcuterie as well. The point of difference that we have here is that we host wine tastings, private wine tastings, or wine masterclasses, which essentially means you'll have you get 6 different wines, and you'll have a sommelier sit with the group for a group booking, for a couple of hours, and talk through the region, how the wine's made, and anything that the group wants to know, essentially. Another popular add-on for this was to include cheese. So the group would get 6 different cheeses paired with the 6 different wines. So my role was, for the most part, hosting those tastings. The critical incident that happened to us, well, not just to us, but everyone in the industry, was COVID-19, which sort of reared its head in last March in 2020, when the government advice at that time was for businesses to stay open, while simultaneously telling the general population to stay home, which obviously was pretty devastating for small businesses like this. Eventually we went into full lockdown anyway, which meant we couldn't operate as a bar. Now, 80% of our sales come from customers drinking in, and 20% comes from off-license sales. So at the beginning of the first lockdown, we thought we would still operate as an off-license, and perhaps that could generate some income. Unfortunately, though, this was there was just no one around in the streets, and no one was really coming in. So after a few weeks, we decided it wasn't worthwhile. I think when most people were going out, they were just making one trip, which was to the supermarket to buy their food, and then, of course, would just buy their wine at the same time. So, large supermarket chains were largely unaffected by COVID. And winemakers, or bulk producers, and those big companies and co-ops that stock supermarkets, again, were largely unaffected, and in fact, they probably increased their market share. Whereas in restaurants and the bar trade, essentially became non-existent, which obviously had a knock-on effect with us closed and other restaurants closed and other bars closed. Obviously the merchants and wine suppliers who supply the bulk of their wine to restaurants and bars, we stopped ordering from them, as probably every other close restaurant did too. So their sales dried up, and this would have affected small family boutique vineyards and estates that predominantly sell their wine to the restaurant trade. Also, again, the local producers would have been largely affected as well. We get our wine direct from places like Court Garden and Whiston and Ridgeview and Stockholm Estate. They drop their wines off weekly. Obviously, with us being closed, we didn't need to order from them. Which also, of course, would have affected our, cheese and charcuterie suppliers as well. Last summer we could reopen, but with social distancing, which reduced our capacity to, half. So to conserve some cash flow, we reduced our wine list, as some of our suppliers have quite large minimum orders, which again is a problem for cash flow. So we stopped ordering from some of those as well. And then, of course, we had to adjust our food offering to allow for a substantial meal, which again is, and then, only one household coming, and then, it's, malarkey. So, and then we went into lockdown anyway. So in December, when we knew that was coming, we thought, well, how can we generate some cash flow while we're closed? So we thought, well, what if we do the wine tastings virtually via Zoom? We did a trial run with some friends of the business. We gave them some wines and followed the same format as our standard private tastings to see if we could recreate the same or similar experience online. So we did a couple of trial runs and they seemed to go very well. So we started advertising just before Christmas, and I was actually surprised by how many bookings we got. So we were fully booked for online tastings from around Christmas up until essentially a week ago. And especially around sort of that January time, there were lots of people, families who couldn't catch up, be together, and a lot of work functions got cancelled. So we're quite happy to, get together via Zoom and see each other through us doing a wine tasting with them. So they were very well received. So on Fridays we would do 4 sessions, Friday night, and then Saturday we would do 4 sessions as well. So I was doing 2 on a Friday, 2 on a Saturday, and my colleague was also doing the other 2 on a Friday and the other 2 on a Saturday. Now when we were doing these in store, normally we could only have a maximum of 6 people. Of course online, there wasn't really any maximum. So there was a silver lining there. We could do large groups. Some of the we did some work functions and some larger families and birthday parties where there was 30 or 40 people. So from a cash flow point of view, that was that was pretty good. There was a silver lining there, having no limit of how many people could join essentially. So normally when we would do them in store, we would have 6 wines. So we would start with an English fizz, then 2 whites, 2 reds, and a dessert wine. Unfortunately, we couldn't use an English fizz or any fizz because if we sent them, by the time they arrive a couple of days later, they would obviously be flat, which means we just sort of lowered our price a little bit and used 5 wines, so no fizz. Now normally when we would do them in store, we would change the wines each week. So for our regulars, it meant every time they come they get to try something different. And also from the sommelier point of view, it's you could sort of just choose whatever you want off the shelf as long as it was within a certain price range, again, which keeps it fresh, and you get to talk about something different each time. For the online wine tastings, we thought instead of using different wines each week, that would mean we'd have to replace a larger range of wines from different suppliers. So we thought we'll just choose 5 wines from one supplier, and then we'll just use those for the for the lockdown period for the virtual tastings. So that's what we did. So most of our entry level and sort of natural wines come from Le Cave de Perrine. So we chose 5 wines from them, which again was good for cash flow because we just ordered exactly what we needed, and because we could see how many bookings and how many people were in each booking, we could order accordingly, just replace what we had used the previous week and order accordingly for the upcoming week, which again was conserve cash flow. The downside was it meant that we had to talk about the same 5 wines every session, which got to get a bit stale. There were some groups that actually booked again, and we were able to sub in some different wines for them to keep it fresh for them. So the wines that we were using was a Chenin Blanc from South Africa, which was fresh, fruity, unoaked, and then a Falangina from Molise in Italy. So here there was a nice contrast of a New World wine, modern winemaking, fresh, approachable style, followed by something a little bit fuller, a little bit different, indigenous grape variety, old world, a bit more rustically made. So some interesting talking points there. And then for the reds, a biodynamically farmed natural Cabernet Sauvignon from Margaret River, Australia, which was unoaked and again very sort of fresh and powerful, but juicy and restrained. And then a Graciana from Mendoza, which had a year in oak. And again, this gave a good contrast of an unoaked wine and an oaked wine, and how oak can influence the flavour of red wine. And then we finished with a sweet fortified sherry from Jerez, which I think gave a nice rounded balance for a wine tasting. There's some stuff there that people would be familiar with, that they'd most likely enjoy, and then a couple of things probably most people haven't tried before, so again it gives them sort of something interesting and a bit different. So we would use these little bottles, which we would fill up. They're 100 mils, and then top it up with some argon spray. Bottle those, put them in a little box, and send them to the customer, or locals could come and just collect it from store. So the benefit of this was that doing it online, we also got larger exposure, because obviously in store it's just essentially local people, whereas online we were doing them for people in Manchester, in Scotland. So of course if they come down to Brighton, they're likely to remember us and come say hello. So again, the silver lining that we could take from it was at least we've got greater exposure in the UK, which is quite nice. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how we could have prevented COVID, but adapting to the restrictions and then putting our tastings online at least generated some cash flow for us to stay afloat and get our business name out there a little bit as well. So yeah, the tastings were very well received, and we'd usually end with a little message of just sort of politely encouraging people to, even if it's only once a month they buy wine, but just to do it from their local wine store. So not only are they supporting a small business like us, but they're supporting small winemakers as well. And again, that message was very well received. So that's how we've been able to essentially overcome this lockdown. Cheers.